we on? Good. Welcome to the Better Than Not podcast. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. But when we at least do something, we know it's almost always better than not. Hi there, and welcome to Better Than Not, the podcast that aims to capture shifting perspectives and thought-provoking ideas in conversation, based loosely on my series, A Changing Frame of Reference, which you can read on the Substack app, and I hope you will. I hope you'll subscribe to it, actually, as it might give you some insight into what this podcast is all about. I'm your host, Doug Gardam, and today it's a pleasure to welcome Pastor,
That's right.
Levi Friesen. Levi, how are you?
I'm well, Doug. I've been slow to respond to your emails, so I'm glad that we finally found the time to make this work.
What I think's funny is this is the coffee we were supposed to have over the last 3 years.
Yes.
So there you go. And you're going to have water. So
That's great.
anyway, Levi is the new pastor, I think I said, at Northview Community Church's East Abbotsford campus. And I don't know how long we can go with new because you've been there 6 to 8 months.
Since the middle of July.
Yeah, so like you're kind of not, it's like the New Year thing. You can't keep.
Yeah, that's right.
Levi is also a graduate of Northview Community Church's Immerse program and came out of that. So congratulations on that too, because you get your master's in divinity out of that.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is no small program.
No, it's not.
You've recovered.
I have, 4 long years.
So what kind of gets us started interesting on this is I first met Levi through Central Abbotsford's, which is, again, a Northview Community Church's campus in Central Abbotsford, where we live.
Mm-hmm.
He was the intern there.
That's right.
The intern pastor. And so it was kind of interesting kind of going through all that. And then he kind of was, I won't say you exactly encouraged me, but you kind of thought about going to men's Bible study. So I'd already been quite deep immersed into the Bible and reading it and all kinds of, I was always asking questions, and Levi will attest to that. And what ended up happening is they were doing Matthew, the book of Matthew, and I went the first night. And it turned out that Levi's leading this.
That's right.
But the bigger thing for me is I'm figuring on 20 to 30 men at a table listening to someone talk about what each chapter's about. That's in my mind. I show up there, and that first night we had 150 to 170 men.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
And I was super intimidated. And in my old, shall we say, form, I would have got up and left. Because it was just it's too much.
It's a lot.
And so it's a lot in a good way, though. This is what sometimes good things come in a big way, and sometimes you can't take that either.
Yeah.
So I ended up staying. I eventually found a table, got things going on, and so we're nearing, I think, like now the 7th or 8th session that I've kind of been in. So you did 2 years, I think, right? You did full Matthew.
That's
and
correct.
all of Galatians.
That's right.
And then, so with Levi being the intern pastor at Central, you left earlier than anticipated.
Yes, a little bit earlier. Yeah.
Which we were all saddened by. But it turned out like all great, really great for Levi, because he went to be the intern at East Abbotsford, and now you're the pastor there, which is kind of very cool.
Yeah.
And so then I got it back into Bible study again when we started. Now we're doing. Were you in the numbers one? Did you part of the numbers?
I was not in any kind of formal leadership. I was just leading one of those small group table discussions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So now we're doing Joshua, which is kind of like the same because Galatians I've actually found profound. Like it was like I walk around with, because you probably haven't seen you, but I think it's 2:16 where you're justified through the faith in Christ and not through works of the law.
That's right.
And I found that like profound. I just find it kind of, and maybe we'll talk about it today, but we'll see where So anyway, that kind of brings us to where we are today. I've been wanting to get Levi out for coffee. We started into this, and now he said, he's probably waited just to do the in-person. So as we kind of we met, we've talked, don't know really a lot about you,
Yeah.
but one of the questions that kind of persisted for me is, have you always wanted to be a pastor, or like did something occur in your life, like, or something like that just said, this is where I want to go? Like, can you describe like how that
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah. So I can connect some dots from in my childhood to say, you know what, I'm not surprised this is where I've ended up. And yet, along the way, there were a number of other things that seemed like far more likely options.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I can look back at my elementary school yearbooks where they used to have, your picture, your name, and then a little write up about some things about you. My elementary school was small enough that we could do that
Right.
for each student.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the things I remember early on might have been in my kindergarten yearbook was the just the little bit of that description that said Levi loves to read the Bible, one of his favorite things to do.
Oh, it was in there.
It was in there, yeah. So evidently that was something I cared about. I don't remember this at the
wow.
time. Maybe my mom helped me to write that, but
That's cool.
evidently it was something I cared about enough that it was, one of the key things I wanted people to know about me was that I liked reading the Bible.
Okay.
Even as, a five-year-old. Um, and I've been involved in church my whole life. My parents met at Northview in the early '90s.
Oh,
They
wow.
got married and have been there ever since. So this has been my church my whole life. I've grown up in it and have experienced all kinds of different opportunities and levels of leadership within it. But between elementary school and graduating high school, I don't think that pastoral ministry would have been, option 1A,
No,
B, C, D, option 2, 3, 4, 5, any on my radar at all.
it wasn't.
No, not in the slightest.
But you like to read the
Oh
Bible.
yeah. I love to read the Bible. I love to be around church. Love to serve and volunteer.
But further than that.
Yeah, but my heart for what I really loved in high school was math and physics and logic. Those are kind of the things that I loved.
Now, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow. So this is going to be fun conversations.
Absolutely. So, through grade, 10, 11, 12, getting closer to graduation, I kind of began to narrow in, what am I going to do for university? I plan to do post-secondary stuff of some kind. And eventually applied for a few different programs and made the decision, whatever avenue, if I get scholarships, whatever avenue gives me the best scholarships
Right.
is what I'm gonna do. So in grade 12, I applied to kind of two primary things. I applied to do kind of with a track towards law school at Simon Fraser University.
No way.
And the other thing I applied to do was engineering at the University of Victoria.
You're kidding me.
Yeah. So those were the two options I was picking between when it came to what I was going to do when I graduated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did not know this at all.
Yeah, totally. In the back of my mind, I kind of had this dream plan of because you need an undergraduate degree before you can do law school.
Right.
Maybe I'll do an engineering undergrad and then go to law school after I'd finished.
Many would have told you that'd be a powerful choice.
Yes. Maybe a bad choice because, eventually you have to work and get paid for all the schooling that you've done. So if you just go from degree to degree and
I'm aware of the part of that schooling, but the whole I can remember like thinking of engineering and people talking, because obviously the business one was a big one to do.
Yeah.
But people say you could write your own ticket if you go into law after engineering.
Right.
It's like, wow, I just don't know that that's what I want to do. So it's like interesting that you chose it anyway.
Yeah. So in the end, the scholarship opportunities and financial situation of going to the University of Victoria was the better option. Because I would have had to do something before law school anyways. So
And you were good in those subjects too.
Yeah, like good enough to do them.
Yeah,
for sure.
Scholarship.
Yeah. So not like full ride scholarship, but like enough to really help out with the costs. Yeah. My older sister also was attending the University of Victoria. She was a year older than I am.
Okay.
So we were going to share an apartment, and it's going to be a good situation. So I went to UVic. My parents, moved me over there at the start of September. I attended each class once and decided that my heart was not in it.
That quickly?
That quickly, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, this surprises people that I'm a university dropout, because ultimately that's what I became.
You don't come across this yet.
It's a fun thing to have in your back pocket for,
Yeah.
2 truths and a lie, introduce yourself.
A podcast.
Yeah, totally.
No way.
Yeah. So
It was that quick.
it was that quick. And it was honestly probably what I felt in the first class was the same feeling that ended up causing me to leave.
Really?
Because, I liked the math. I was interested by the physics. The work seemed,
You could do it.
interesting and engaging. And I would have enjoyed it. I think the
Yeah.
studying and the learning. And I think it really matters that we have people who are, quality engineers who do good work. And
Especially when we fly in planes.
Yeah. And as a Christian, I think it's important to have, solid Christian people in all kinds of different
Oh, absolutely.
areas of society. But it was just so quick that I realized my heart was so far from this work.
Really?
Yeah. Like, I think it matters. I think it's important. I just didn't
It
care.
wasn't you.
No, I did not care. It would have been cool, would have been fun. I would have been challenged and stretched in all kinds of ways, but just not what I wanted to do.
And you could stand up to do that. Like, you just didn't succumb to, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah,
so
totally.
I'll just do this.
Yeah. And very quickly, what I realized is I think the disconnect that I felt, even with how interesting the subject matter would have been, was that I was choosing between law and engineering for, all kinds of less than helpful reasons, right? Like, both are
Yes.
careers with some prestige to them. Both are careers that,
Absolutely.
can pay you well, and all kinds of, things that do matter when you're choosing direction stuff. But I just very quickly realized that I had put far too much weight on considerations like that, and hadn't thought about, like, okay, ultimately, what are the Lord's purposes for me? What has he given me that I would use for others? So
You're pretty young to
oh yeah,
grab that, though, right? Like be
18.
looking at it that way.
Yeah. I hadn't yet turned 18 because my birthday's in kind of later September.
Okay.
Later September. So this was, first semester of fall after graduating high school.
But looking at you right now, that could have been last year, actually.
that's kind of it. I know I'm starting to grow gray on the sides.
Oh no! Oh no!
But yeah, it was a very interesting time.
I'll bet it was. So, like, when you came home,
Yeah.
like, how did that go over?
Yeah, so I hopped on a Skype call with my parents after, I don't know, 8 days of being at university, and said, Mom and Dad, I'm coming home. And they were unbelievably supportive, given how shocking this would have been. Yeah. Like, I think some of it is to do with how they knew me, right? They had raised me and seen me in all kinds of situations, and they knew I wasn't someone to, I don't know, make a big decision like that flippantly, to say, like, oh, Levi appreciates what it means to drop out of university. Like, I worked hard in high school. I was not a student who, slacked off and did the bare minimum. I worked, and I liked school, and I was, excited about the content. So for me to have that kind of a dramatic change, I think they didn't know what to do with it.
Yes.
But at the very least, they knew this isn't nothing. There's something
that's going on.
Yeah. So I still haven't, I've never talked to them in depth about that, but my experience of them was just so encouraging. And
Really?
Yeah.
So I can share with you, because I don't think I've shared this one.
Okay.
So when I went to university, right? So I went to engineering.
Okay.
And we lived kind of near Toronto, Markham, which is north of Toronto.
Yeah.
That's years and years ago. And I went to Carleton, Ottawa. So that's a long, that was, at that time, it seemed like on the other side of the earth.
Sure.
Like, it was a long way away.
Okay.
And at the end of November, I signed out.
Wow. But I mean, you made it longer than I did.
But the whole thing, I signed it all out on Friday.
Wow.
And Monday morning, I was back there and back in class again.
Oh.
So I was already dating Laura.
Okay.
My parents didn't know, took the bus home Friday night. She had been out with them.
Yeah.
She kind of knew what was going on.
Sure.
And I'm sitting at the house when they walked in.
Oh.
Didn't go over well.
Wow.
Didn't go over well. And so it was kind of a really crazy time, and I was really struggling with it. And Laura used to come and visit me in Ottawa.
Okay. Did she live back in Markham?
Yeah, she was in Toronto. She actually came up to Carleton the following year. And one of the reasons why I went back was because I'd missed those weekends with Laura. And so I went back on Monday, and of course I finished the program, and that's what I spent most of my career doing.
Sure.
But when you said that to me, like I couldn't believe, like
Yeah.
that's the same thing I did. But
Yeah.
you stuck to your guns.
I did, yeah. I stuck to it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so I interrupted you there,
No,
but I
it's
thought
good.
that was kind of a neat thing to have.
That's interesting.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
So now you come back.
Yeah.
They're supporting like your decision.
Yeah.
What's next?
Yeah. So I think they would have been worried if I like stayed at home for months and months on end and didn't find a job.
But that
Go
wasn't
into No, they also made it clear that that was the expectation, that I would find work or something to do,
right.
because I knew I didn't know what I wanted, but I kind of knew that it wasn't that. So I don't know. I'm one of the few people who worked at Canadian Target for a period of time when Target was in
Really?
Canada. Yeah, worked there for a number of months as first a seasonal hire, then I got hired permanently, and then they liquidated all of their assets.
Because that's a few years ago.
Yeah.
Is that 10 years ago?
Yeah,
Or longer?
yeah, about 10.
Because they didn't last you very long.
No, because I graduated 2014, came home 2014, got hired there October
In the fall.
2014.
Really?
Yeah, and then they were liquidated
Wow.
by March of 2015. So,
Oh, it was quick then.
oh yeah, like I worked there just long enough to qualify for severance, which is pretty awesome. So
Yeah,
I
really.
ended up getting paid nearly as much in severance as I earned
The entire time
as
you
a
were there.
Target employee,
Oh, wow.
which is
So you were sitting pretty.
yeah, it's great. It worked out really well.
So you're already thinking though in this that this isn't where I'm going to spend my
No.
career.
The plan was never to work permanently at Target, which
But it was a good experience.
It was a really good experience. Yeah, I worked in the stockroom in the
wow.
back. I liked the kind of the organization dimension of the job, and worked with some interesting people. And
Oh wow.
it was an interesting experience to be a part of a store shutting down and doing like a liquidation fire sale, and all those interesting characters who
And you were on the inside.
Yeah, I know it was. Yeah, it was very interesting. But kind of through that process, I had already begun. One of the first things I did when I came home was I decided, one of the things that I'm going to do that I think is really meaningful is I'm going to start serving at church in the youth ministry. I'm going to be a youth leader. Which wasn't something I'd planned on doing, but I came home and within the first couple of days ran into my youth pastor, and he was like, "Didn't we just say goodbye and send you off to Victoria?" I'm like, "Kyle, I'm back." And he's like, "Do you want to be a youth leader?" And I said, "Sure, sounds fun." And that proved to be a significant turning point for me, because as soon as I started working with teenagers and helping them understand the scriptures, even though I had no formal Bible education myself at that point.
Been in them your
Yeah,
whole life.
yeah, totally. I'd been in and around the church, and Kyle, our youth pastor, done a great job as a Bible teacher. Northview has consistently been a church that teaches the Bible well.
This is my attraction, like because I like it's like that's the thing.
Yeah,
like that's the center.
Yeah,
and I find it fascinating that that's been like every week we have the same thing, and it's not just different quotes.
Yeah,
it's like we do a full book.
Yeah.
Like and often like I'm scratching my head when I come home, right? Because like there's just so much.
Totally.
We're gonna get there, but keep going. So
I started serving with a group of ninth grade boys with a couple of other co-leaders, and just loved it. Like I love working with teenagers. They're a lot of fun. But what I loved the most was taking what God has said in the Bible and saying, okay, what does this mean for you here and now? And that process immediately, because it was something I fell in love with, I said, maybe this is actually where the Lord is leading me, and what I could do with.
But even at this point, you don't have, excuse me, you don't have like, I'm going to be a pastor.
No. I just knew I wanted to do more of this.
Okay.
So that fall, after coming home from UVic and working at Target in that same fall, I applied to go to Columbia Bible College. I enrolled there in the youth work program, and got accepted and started the next fall with my studies.
So you so when you left university, you went to Target.
Yeah.
And then you were out for a year and then started CBC?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. But I applied for CBC very shortly after coming home.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you kind of were thinking that's where you were going to head.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
But again, not with any designs on pastoral ministry necessarily early on, but very quickly it became that. over the course of my time there, as I continued to do service at the church and work with teenagers and be involved in other ways. Very quickly it became, I think this is the direction I'm heading.
More so than, like, I'll call it the academic scholarly.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
That was a very active wrestle for me. Um, but I think largely I knew that in myself, that the easiest path for me, maybe the most attractive path, was going to be to seek, an academic position, to be in the classroom teaching.
Right.
But one of those places in my own mind where I realized, easy is not always an indicator that it's the best thing.
Right.
So I might have to challenge myself to continue to integrate what I'm learning with people. And I'm so thankful that was, again, probably wisdom from God, not anything I've conjured up in myself. Because my own wisdom would have said, stay in the classroom.
Let's be comfortable.
Yeah, be comfortable, and get into the abstract, the nebulous stuff, and wrestle it down and deal with ideas and concepts, but never worry about translating that to real life.
Right.
And I'm so thankful that wasn't where the Lord let me stay.
Interesting, man.
So
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So you started CBC. You were there for 4 years.
Yeah, it took me 4 years plus a semester to finish my undergraduate degree. So 4.5 years.
Okay, and you're continuing your youth work and immersion in the world at Northview.
That's right, including a full 1-year internship there as a part of my undergrad.
Oh, really?
My third year was entirely spent kind of boots on the ground at Northview.
Oh, so you were really getting a taste for it.
Yeah, and that's the way the youth work program at CBC was designed, to give you, a significant amount of time in a local church doing the work, to see if it's actually a good fit for you.
Right. So did you have any, did mission work get interesting, or anything like other things that are outside of, shall we say, the direction of pastoring, so to speak?
I don't think so. One of my consistent summer job through my degree was doing outreach through soccer camps. So I worked with Athletes in Action, which is kind of a big global organization that one of the things they do is they partner with local churches to help them reach their own communities. And so soccer camps are one tool that we use to say, hey, you're going to invite kids from your community. There'll be a high quality soccer camp here, and we're going to teach them about Jesus and the gospel and these kinds of things. And I love it. I play soccer. I love the teaching. I love the relational work with the kids. But for me, the hard thing was, you're with the church for a week and then you move on and start over with a new church the next week. And it's 8 weeks of mayhem all summer. And it's great and it's awesome and it's fun. And, you get to play soccer and hang out with kids and do all the important things of all the other ministry that I could do. But there was just something about the local church and being part of one local church that really drew me in. And I don't know if it's my tendency is to kind of be a plotter, to kind of stick at the same thing.
Right.
And
you don't know.
Yeah, and that's part of the way that the Lord wired me to make me want to stay. But
so the program that you just graduated from, did you start that literally out after leaving CBC?
Yeah, so I graduated CBC in December of 2019.
Okay.
And then, the Immerse program that I did for the last 4 years picks up in the fall. So I had that last year of my degree, kind of 2019, and then into 2020, I was applying for the Immerse program, waiting to see if I got accepted. In general, when I haven't worked in the church, the jobs I've done have been janitorial. So between CBC and starting the Immerse program, I got hired as a janitor at the college.
Oh,
because that's just, I've worked at water parks in the summer as a janitor.
That's what you
I've
do.
done facilities work at the church, moving tables and chairs and helping out with stuff like that. And I've been a janitor at a Bible college. So that's what I did while I was waiting.
So now you go in and you literally start the big, at pandemic time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So whatever, September of 2020. So March 2020 being when things begin.
Right. Yeah.
6 months later, I start my pastoral ministry training at the graduate level now.
And so I'm thinking 2020, because at the end of 2020, we thought we were out of it. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like through the summer even. Yeah. Like it was kind of March to April to May was, a little hairy. And then the summer, everything kind of relaxed. And you're like, oh.
That was our first summer here.
Yeah. Oh, that was.
Yeah. Wow. So this is what I kind of remember. So I'm tracking with our time.
Yeah.
And then it's like it just went nuts.
Yeah, yeah, and kept going nuts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not sure it's still not.
yeah, well, yeah, yeah.
But it's so you were did you go so you weren't going to Northview during much of the pandemic, right? Like you were doing it online, or were you? Can then they close it for a while too?
Yeah. In the summer, kind of reopened in some limited sizes. I think if I got my timeline right, but yeah, a lot of it was online.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So I'm interested in the Immerse program from your perspective
yeah,
because, I'm going to go back to. So remember, like, you're the intern pastor,
yeah.
and we see you around. You're always very friendly, as you can tell, and I get to know you a little bit, talking, and many times thinking about going for a coffee.
Yeah.
Never happened, and then you left. But what you were asked to do a message early on, and I wish I could remember what it was, but
I don't know if I can remember what it was either.
so I can remember being you're that friendly Levi we see at the door.
Yeah.
Then you stood up like you owned like the sanctuary. Like I was like quite blown away. As was Laura. I'm not sure that was the one where you talked about abiding. Do you remember using the word abide?
I think that one's a little later. Yeah.
But it was like you just took on like the whatever you were talking about that time and really brought it home because you had a number of things. Remember the car accident you talked about, and your soccer injury, right?
Yeah.
When you got the cut or whatever, and relating those two. So where did that start to happen where you had to, okay, how am I going to actually put these together? Like, and the mentoring that would go on from other pastors, like when did that really, like, because you haven't even talked about that.
No,
To
totally.
me, that's a big part of like you came in today saying, well, I still got to get my message done for Saturday or Sunday. I guess it's Sunday, right?
Yeah.
And so when did that, like, how did that start to come together for you? Because like,
so one of the early experiences I had in the Immerse program was a kind of a closed environment preaching opportunity where the new Immerse students coming in order to understand what skills do they bring to the table. Are they good at this? Is there a lot of growth needed in the kind of the area of public communication, preaching, and teaching? One of the things we did was myself, Eric, Adam, all of the kind of our group of Immerse students, all of us had to write a sermon which we would preach to other older Immerse students, to a number of our pastors in one of the rooms in the church.
Really?
Yeah. So kind of closed environment, and would immediately after preaching those sermons receive feedback. So it's an interesting place. It's a very specific kind of context, but it's a really helpful one because even with that small group of people, it mimics the pressures of a much larger group of people.
Being in front of a group.
Yeah, in some ways. Yeah. Those kind of additional dynamics mean it actually is a bit of a revealing test to see kind of where you're at in these things. And I came into the Immerse program with a real passion for that kind of teaching stuff, but without any real understanding of what that would look like. Am I going to be kind of more of a one-on-one pastoral figure who, in conversation, brings truths to bear on situations and can be an encouragement and all these kinds of things in a smaller context? Am I more of a kind of a classroom guy, kind of in that mid-sized space, or am I, on every Sunday preaching from the front? Is that in my skill set? And I had no idea coming into the Immerse program. You do a little bit of that if you take a preaching class in your undergraduate studies, but that means I preach to my peers like twice.
Like the presentation of a project.
Totally. Yeah. Right. And it's structured differently than your other presentations, but it's still a kind of a comfortable environment because I've spoken in front of my classmates before. That's not anything weird.
Right.
But this was a little different, right? Where you're like, oh, I've got free reign on this thing. I'm taking any text I want. I'm writing a sermon on it, and I'm preaching it to people with lots of experience doing that themselves and evaluating others who do it. So, daunting situation, but ended up being maybe the most clarifying experience for me.
Really?
In that all of us received, positive, helpful feedback, areas for continued growth, these sorts of things. But I was not expecting that for myself. I was not surprised to hear my peers get good feedback. I thought they did a great job and had lots of natural skills. But when I'm speaking publicly, I overthink everything I see in other people's faces.
Oh, while you're
Oh,
speaking.
totally. Yeah.
Oh, really?
It's real dangerous because I'm like, there's it.
Where was I?
Yeah, totally. It almost doesn't even bother me when someone is sleeping while I'm talking. Like I'm like, oh, they just had a long day. That's easy to read.
Right.
But somebody who's like listening, and if I don't know what their expressions mean,
Right.
sometimes active listening becomes like, uh-oh, what are they thinking? So anyways, I'm all in my head. I'm not coming into this program with a clear sense of this is what I'm supposed to do. And yet the feedback that I got after that was, we think this is what you ought to do. You have a lot of skills in this, you have a lot of giftings, lots of areas to grow still, but this seems to be something that should be a part of whatever you go on to do.
Ah, that's pretty positive.
It was very positive and so unexpected, honestly. Like I was blown away coming in with zero expectation, and then all of a sudden feeling like, oh, there's some clarity here that I had not had. I thought that's what engineering was going to be,
right, and it didn't come.
And then, but immediately in this,
it was there.
It was there.
So you've been doing this now for 2.5, 3 years.
So the Immerse program is 4 years.
No, but I mean, when you were like you did as an intern, pastor, you did a couple of messages at the church for Central. Then you went to East
and did similar things there.
Right.
Yeah. So about 3.5 years. Yeah.
So now, this is still pretty early on in that. Any surprises like that? Like, so as an example, do you feel you have a bit of a gift for this? That's one question.
Yeah.
And the other is, what have you kind of like, I didn't see this coming, or did you have any others? This has just been, this is just part of me.
Yes, that's good. Yeah. So just for context, I think I've probably preached about 55, 60 sermons by now. Which
is a crazy number.
Which is, like it's a lot for 3 years.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's a drop in the bucket compared to what somebody on the other end of their career is looking back at. But, I think other people told me that it was an area of gifting. And eventually I had to believe them, I think.
Did you start to feel it though? Like, are you feeling it kind of now? Like,
I think so. But again, it's hard for me to know what's just through repetitions what I've become familiar with versus, what's a natural aptitude. And I think the way that most of our giftings work is that it's a combination of both, right? You train at it, you work at it, you practice it, you trust the Lord is working through those things. But also, some people have a tendency to be good at certain things, and other people don't. There's only so much you can train.
And I also think there's something about it connects with you deeply.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't anticipate. Like, it's like, I don't know why this is like this, but because it's not like I controlled that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
and honestly, if I contrast the way that I felt about engineering school and the way that I felt about, preaching sermons.
Right.
Yeah. Could not be more night and day in terms of how it resonated with my soul. Not just like, I like this work, but like, oh, I get it. This is why this matters. So I think the purpose and the passion became very evident to me quite quickly.
It's interesting you bring this, because this is one of the arguments I've had for a number of years, and this is like, I'll go to the guidance counselor world, and it's like, what are you good at?
Yeah.
And I've from my own experience, it's, well, what I'm good at is not necessarily what I want to do, though. And that's why I'm asking the question about resonating, because it's like, you're good at math, but do I want to see another Excel spreadsheet again?
Do I ever want to do more calculus? No.
And it's like, but when you meet a person who's wired for math, it's that thing, right? It's just, oh my goodness, man. Like, that's not, I'm good, but like, that's like a whole other thing. So that's why I was asking, like, you've kind of done a great phrasing of it touched your soul.
Yeah. And I don't know if I would have had words for that early on. There was something intangible about the draw that I felt to it. But one of the things about pastoral ministry that I've had enough people kind of help me think about it well, that this was something I was always mindful of is, anytime you're doing something publicly that can come with a lot of recognition, I think the Lord has been kind to me in that I have not found it hard to identify when my draw to that thing is because of like a pride or an ego, or,
Interesting.
I like the attention or I like the affirmation. I think it's been able to be something that I've navigated through the help of lots of, friends speaking into these things, and just having other people to bounce my own kind of processing off of, to say,
Well, you're kind of in a good group
oh yeah, totally.
for that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's one of the real, you've asked kind of about the Immerse program more
Yeah.
generally. One of the real strengths was the group of students I got to work alongside with who were doing our studies with us. A few left the program earlier to move into other programs and things. So we had initially 5 of us in the cohort: myself, Eric, who came in from being a lawyer for a decade, Adam, who came in from another seminary with a whole bunch of other experience,
Okay.
our high school youth pastor, Luke, and then Angie, who was overseeing one of our women's Bible studies, had a ton of experience teaching and wanted some formal training to go with it.
Oh, wow.
And so to have the 5 of them, we'd be in class together, and then we'd sit down later that week before the next class and just talk about the stuff that we were learning and hearing and reading, and also like what our own development was like. And so to have that group, that kind of intentional cohort, was invaluable in so many ways.
And unique.
Yeah.
Like, it's very unique, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It kind of amazes me because, like, it's one of the things that I had. This comes right out of Northview, and this is one of the things that I've heard is that one of the real good things I thought was, because everyone's aware that, oh, I like this pastor, but I don't like this pastor.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
And it's like they're
Wait. People don't like their pastors sometimes?
I know.
You should have told me that 6 to 8 months ago when I got hired.
Well, it was just so intriguing to me that becoming aware of that. And like the previous lead pastor here, right, was changed, that we don't know who's going to be the one giving the message.
Yeah, that's right.
Because it got so focused around one person. Right? It's the cult of personality.
That's right.
Sense, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I thought was one of the great things, before the pastor speaks at the church, what was being said was, what is God trying to tell you through this pastor? Not what this pastor is trying to tell you about.
Yeah.
And I thought that just changed my frame of reference. It just shifted it in an instant.
Oh, and that's so important, because we just have a tendency, we're such visual creatures, that what we see is all that we think about.
Absolutely.
And God is invisible. And my pastor is very visible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that is such an important, like, one of the things that I consistently pray before other people preach, and what I would love it if somebody prayed this every time before I preach, would be to say, God, would you cause this pastor's words to be your words? As they speak, yes. Would you speak through them? Because that's what we're messengers, right? We don't create in some, there's a creative aspect to our work,
right?
But we're trying to relay a message, proclaim and relay what someone else has said, and just to show you, why it matters for you, and how it relates to your life now. So we do some like translating work, or like I said, relay or transmit, but it's always with the understanding that someone else has said, the Lord has said through the first author of this biblical text.
Yes.
And I'm just trying to make it make sense to you. So,
and you're always going back to, like, even when you cite a story, you're always going back to the scripture part of it. It doesn't stand alone.
No. Yeah.
So is that something that you learned, or is that a natural thing that kind of came about for you to say, like, this will help me explain this parable, or this will help me explain this part?
That's a really good question. So a lot of my early experience in ministry was working with children and teenagers.
Okay.
And so I think early on I realized, I can say even a very plain sentence, but especially kids who are, pre-abstract thinking, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, this kind of thing. I need some way to ground it in something they can touch, something they can see. And that was honestly a big way in which my work with soccer camps was helpful. Because a lot of what we were trying to do is say, okay, there's a real world around us. We're out on a field. There's birds that fly by, these kinds of things. How can I use the stuff that kids can see and feel and touch, and what they experience when they play a soccer game and lose, or whatever it is? How can I use that stuff to say, okay, this is what God has said, but here's how I can help you understand what God has said. Amazing. So I think it was something that I was forced to learn to be anywhere near decent at my job.
No, it's amazing that you bring that forward, because to me that's some of the most important things to connect with. Like what when you say this is what I think about. Is I remember hearing Alistair McGrath in some discussion, being a C.S. Lewis biographer.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the two versions of pain that Lewis wrote about, right? One was kind of the intellectual, and then his wife died, and then what the real part of it was.
That's right.
And what Alice McGrath talked about was the idea of, and this is why I think what you just said is so important, is that you can't not have pain in your life or suffering. Like, we do try to post that we got to be happy all the time, right? Like that's kind of thing that we hear all. Why are you sad?
Yeah.
And what he said was, he thought he was trying to do was saying, why aren't we given better tools in order to deal with the pain we're going to see, the suffering we're going to have, versus just trying to negate it.
Sure.
And when you just said that about with the kids, and trying to bring like connecting the scripture, it kind of helps them deal with life in many ways.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. And I think that's what I love about, whether you do this for money as a part of your job, whether you do this in a lay capacity, as many of our men's Bible study table leaders do in a lay capacity. What you're doing is you're engaging in the most important and hardest things in people's lives, if they'll let you.
Yes.
If they'll let you into their suffering, if they'll let you into their grieving, and you're like, oh, the scriptures say things that are relevant to this. There's nothing more important than that in so many ways, because what that is the intersection of so many things people are uncomfortable with all at the same time. The pain that they're feeling, the lack of control that they're feeling, the loss of something they held to very tightly, whatever it is. Like there are layers to suffering that we don't like any of the layers, and yet they're all there.
Yeah.
And so much about pastoral ministry is what I'm doing. Maybe I don't think this explicitly in the moment, but so much of it is I'm going to say things to people when times are good,
right?
That they'll learn them when times are good, so that when they walk through things that are hard, they've been prepared for it. They've had the resources given to them, the tools given to them, so that when it's tough, their life doesn't feel like it's falling apart or blowing up. And maybe it does at the periphery, but at the core of things, the center still holds.
And we have a hard time with that temporary part of that.
Yes, totally.
Right? Like, I'm sad, so I'll be sad for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Or whatever that kind of issue.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I could only hold on to this excitement for another 5 minutes. Like, and it's like we have real troubles with that.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, why it's so interesting hearing and asking you about the pastoral message part of it. Because it's in hearing that and hearing another interpretation, I've got so many things passing through my head, but I'm thinking, going back to the Galatians study that you led, and there were two things that were like three things actually. So I mentioned 2:16 already.
Yeah.
And that was really big to me. Like that was like a huge, in fact, I mentioned McGrath. I think he's done a whole book on justification, right?
Probably.
And it's just like, this is not how I kind of understood it. Like I can actually earn my way into heaven. Like that's kind of like, that's, if I do good, I'm gonna go there.
Yeah.
And if I don't, I'm not.
Totally.
And it comes from a very young age. But then we've got these other things that were become so pertinent even in our world today. So one of them was whether you're Jewish or of Gentile.
Yeah.
Well, that means everyone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Jew and not Jew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, where did we miss this one? Like, how did we miss? And then I find out that it's not in Galatians, but it's also in Colossians, and it's in Ephesians, and it's like, and then he does the big one where he says, and I always thought of this as like, it doesn't matter whether you're circumcised or uncircumcised.
Yeah.
God doesn't care about this, right? And this is Paul speaking. Like, to me, I think it's gigantic.
Yeah.
And I joke about it because I said, like, how did the guys feel that they had just been circumcised? And Paul's telling us, what are you doing, man?
They were like, couldn't your letter have got here two days earlier?
Well, this is one of the things
an hour earlier.
I found like quite transformational with Paul.
Mm.
Like just so stunning. I've become fascinated. I've written a lot about Paul because I just like, has there been another human in history that has done what he did? In the sense of being so like top Jewish.
Yeah.
From intellect, academic, action, rules, knowing it.
A whole life embracing of this thing. Yeah.
And then a Damascus moment.
Yeah.
And then his whole life from then on was dedicated to supporting Jesus. And it's like, that's pretty crazy. The other thing I can't believe with Paul is when they talk about the great like authors of our world, like the literary world, part of my world, and he's never mentioned. And like when you can read Romans, as you know, just even one chapter of Romans over and over, and it transforms in front of what you're reading. So going back to your pastor part, does that happen to you when you're going through and creating what because now you said like you've done 60. So you could have done fun for almost every book of the Bible now.
That's right. Haven't, but could have.
But do you find like, that's just how I was thinking of that before. Like what I'm saying to you is when I have that transformational moment in reading, like, Laura and I did the Galatians before that. So we went through that. So, and I had read it before. But never, that never hit me before. Do those things happen to you like on a regular basis when you're putting together like, or from when you started? So I mentioned the abiding one or something or that. Do they come back to you in a different form or a different way to like, oh, that's not quite what I mean now?
That's a great question. I haven't been doing this long enough to really preach texts that I have preached before. What I do find, though, is that I'll preach a text that covers the same theological ground as a text I've done before.
Okay.
And this thing that was a real wrestle for me the first time, how do I, there's a tension here in this text. How do I talk about both of these things truly without minimizing one or the other? Because that's, both are distortions of what's actually going on.
Right.
How do I talk about both of them meaningfully and show their compatibility together? So that kind of a thing, that pops up on a consistent basis. So I'm preaching out of 1 John chapter 2, which talks about, first, if you sin, you have Jesus as your advocate because he's perfect. He's all these things. Right. But then what John goes on to say later on in the next verses that are also a part of my text that I'm writing a sermon on is not only here's this relief of Jesus as your advocate, but then here's how you know Jesus is if you don't sin, is if you follow his commandments, is if you obey, if you walk like he walked. If you don't do that, you don't have him as your advocate, which is, it's an interesting, cyclical sort of wrestle because you're like, okay, if I sin, I have Jesus. But if I sin habitually, that communicates something about me that says, in fact, I don't, because I'm preferring this thing instead of that thing. It's so the wrestle between tensions, and when I see how the author is saying both of those things together, those are the light bulb moments for me.
Oh, okay.
Which is to say, in a text like 1 John, the interpretive key is that at one point he says, this is how you know him. So it's not this is how you know him by doing this stuff, by not sinning. It's a question of not are you a Christian, but can you have confidence?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have assurance of your faith?
You are.
Yeah. And here's how you have assurance is if you increasingly obey his commandments, if you increasingly walk as he walked. And honestly, the way that so many of these things are resolved in my own mind is by saying, okay, what does the rest of the Bible say about this?
Right.
Because I may be stuck on this tension here, but this author has talked about the same thing earlier in the book, where he said this thing earlier on that becomes, an interpretive key or an interpretive lens that I need to read this through because I can't separate this from that. He said both these things in one letter that was meant to be read cohesively. So the tensions are often apparent tensions. And I love that light bulb moment when you say, okay, here's how it works together. I forgot that he had said this earlier. And that really settles things for me. So the key for my text this week is that one chapter earlier. Paul said in 1 John 1:8, or John said in 1 John 1:8, if anyone says he doesn't have sin, he's a liar.
Yes.
Right. And so that's an interpretive framework which says, you know what, the point here in 1 John 2 is not to say you have to be sinless.
Right.
Anyone who claims to be sinless is a liar, according to John. Yes. So it means something else. What does it mean? And so it must be talking about assurance of salvation, not earning salvation. So those tensions, as I wrestle them out, that's where I find life in the scriptures. And when that clarity comes through, I'm like, oh, that's what I need for this weekend, because that's what people are wondering. Yep, you know, I'm saved by Jesus. I know that, right? I'm justified not by works of the law, but by faith in Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
But I still sin. I still struggle, and my sin matters. So how does that? It doesn't save me, but it still matters.
Well, it's kind of like, I come back to this because that's such an illuminating point, is because there's a sense inside us that we can not sin.
Tell me what you mean by that.
Like, I feel like when I talk to certain people, it's like, yeah, I cannot sin. And it's like, well, just by saying that, you're almost
yeah.
Like, I don't think we kind of like, there's this thing, it's all about me.
Yeah.
And believe in yourself, and you can do this.
Yeah.
And it's like, we kind of, because if we have the sense that we can earn our way,
right?
I know that's simplified beyond,
yeah,
but if we have that, well, our whole society is all about earning.
Of course.
I'll do this and you'll pay me this. It's an transactional.
Yeah.
It's embedded us, I call it epigenetically. It's very, very deep.
Yeah.
So when we go to church, we almost have to kind of switch our head and say, you can't earn your way here.
Yeah.
No matter what you think you can do, you can't do it.
Yeah. And then the rest of our week is fighting our head back the other way. And so that's one thing. So church is weekly. Because we need to reorient every week. But you're right? We have that tendency. And it's
so weird to me,
and it's so deep in there.
Oh yeah, it's, and I kind of think sometimes when we're going through these, it's like I was saying to somebody the other day, like there's 168 hours in the week, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we go to church for 2 hours, as an example.
Yeah.
Like those are not good odds.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, and when you look at the infinity that's in that book. Yeah. I can hope to try and understand it, but I'm never going to understand the whole thing, right? And it's kind of like it gives you something to, I know I can't get it all, but it doesn't seem to at all dampen my desire to figure that out.
Yeah.
And now it's become even worse because, to your point, you read a verse, and there's so much in that verse, that I got to go back and check those names, and you didn't get to the next verse.
Yeah.
Like I remember asking you at a Bible study, so how many times do you read a chapter?
Yeah.
Before you go, well, about 5 times, I think is what you said to me.
Yeah, probably.
And I'm kind of going like, I've just not been a reader like that in my life.
I haven't been a reader like that with any other book. Which is, which I think
that's cool. That's good to know.
Which is fair.
Yes.
I think that's the case for a lot of people, where most of the time when it's human communicating to human, we write so that the other person understands it immediately and exhaustively. That's the mark of a good writer in some ways.
Absolutely.
That they can actually communicate what they're trying to say.
Yeah.
We look at that and say, way to go, you did it. But the scriptures are already God, who is high and exalted, descending, making himself known.
Yeah.
And so as we're reading the scriptures, we should recognize that what we're talking about is actually, unless God has descended to us, it's beyond anything we can understand with our natural, cognitive faculties.
That's a good way of looking at it.
In the first place. So we ought to expect it to be functionally limitless. There's no limit to the number of times you could read the Bible and still be, plumbing the depths of new things. Maybe you have the categories in place, but now you're going deeper into those categories each time.
Oh, it kind of blows my mind. Like,
Yeah.
I just kind of like, you must be loving the fact of the age we're in the sense that when you said you go to this and you can go back to where it was said before, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to like physically go
Yeah.
through the pages. Like, we have this instant like hyperlinks.
Yeah. I have a software that's full of hyperlinks.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So helpful.
Like, that's what I said. When you have this, then you try to read a verse, and like, I didn't get to the next verse because there's so much in this verse.
Because there's 3 hyperlinks at the end of that verse that took me to other places.
The one I'm looking the other day. So I'm listening to the Apologetics Canada podcast with Russell Brand.
Okay.
So Russell Brand to me is kind of this new on the front, loud comedian, popular. I find comedians very philosophical.
Yes,
like, I think they're
absolutely.
almost the good ones to me are like brilliant.
Yeah.
They give you stuff that's right in front of your face.
Yeah.
Anyway, Russell Brand talking to Apologetics Canada, and he goes to the effect, Satan doesn't want your worship. He wants you to worship yourself. And I'm going like, why am I learning this from Russell Brand? Look, that's... Well, it kind of brought me back to Screw Tape Letters. I'm sure you've read that, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Is it not?
Yeah.
Like, I like it because I can remember it.
Yeah,
too,
that's
but
good.
it's like, it just stuck in my head.
Yeah. Yeah, like I would probably expand on it to say, you know what, Satan just doesn't want you to worship God.
There you go.
He wants you to worship anything else. Anything else.
That's good.
Yourself is just maybe the easiest target to turn your attention
I got
towards.
A part and B part thanks to Levi.
But you know, it's
true.
I don't disagree with what
that's
Mr. Brand is saying.
Crazy to me. It's just crazy that it's coming from different, I'll say, areas that I hadn't anticipated.
Well, I mean, who would have anticipated it from Russell Brand, right?
It floors me, right? I just like some of these things that kind of come out. The other thing, I go back to Paul, and you were saying, this is where we were talking about thinking we could actually, I can do that. I can live up to those 10 commandments. And he says, you're cursed by them. Because you can't. No one can. They're impossible to do. Yeah. And it's like, why didn't I learn that earlier?
Yeah. Yeah, like Paul will use the language of being imprisoned under the law. Yeah. You're held captive by it.
Yeah. Why didn't I get that? Like, it's just, and the other one now that just got me into this, and I think this came out of this particular podcast too, was I don't do what I want, and I do what I don't want, from Romans 7:15, I think it is. Yeah. I'm paraphrasing it, but
But how insightful to the human condition is that, right? Like, yes, to the Christian who has been saved by Jesus, who knows what we should do, but even deeper than that, knows what we should want to do, and wants to want, like, you want to want that, but you struggle to want
yes,
the right, like Paul, that's
over and over again.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So I'm going to go back to your science world a little bit here, because I like this. So one of the big things that hit me as really odd is I didn't create myself. Like, I had nothing to do with like being born in Canada, being born in the 20th century. I had nothing to do with my name, who my parents were. And that was one of the things that fundamentally started me going, there's more to this than I thought. Like, and that's kind of the science kind of world to it, right? Yeah. And there were multiple things that kind of added to this. So one of the things that started to add was the fact that, I'm stealing a little bit, I think, from Eric McTaxis on this, but in the 60s, 70s, Carl Sagan said, there's 2 things you need in order to create life. You need a star, and you need a planet a certain distance from the star. Like, that's 50 years ago. Anyway, right? Yeah. Today, that's like 200 parameters, right? Yeah. And like, you have like the fundamental forces that we had. Gravity, nothing to do with us. We didn't create any of it, right? Electromagnetic, nope, didn't have anything to do with that one. You could just keep going with science, right? Yeah. And you see all this. You can go out to the cosmos with this, far as is infinite.
Yeah.
But you can go the other way, deep, deep, deep into the cell.
Yeah, to the subatomic.
Like it just keeps we just keep discovering new stuff. It seems to me, and it's like it all fits together. Like that's what makes me laugh about AI a little bit, because there's talk that it becomes sentient, it'll be able to reason, quiet, like, and it's kind of going like we can't create like the first atom on the periodic table.
Yeah,
we have like no clue.
Yeah.
And we have this kind of grand thing that we can have it. And those were the things that started to really make me say, there's much more than I read the Abraham story. No, I actually saw it dramatized on the Bible series.
Oh, okay.
And I'm going like, here we are. You've been promised by God to have descendants that outnumber the stars.
Yeah.
Your wife's barren, Sarah, and she comes to you and says, that's not right. So you have to do something in order to make God's promise go forward. So you go to my slave girl Hagar. I'm watching this dramatized, right? Yeah. And you're just going like, and for whatever reason, it was like, that's not going to go well. And that was the first, because I've seen Abraham since I was like 5 years old.
Sure.
Like that story.
Yeah.
But it had never occurred to me that, well, and it's like that's one story, right? Like it's like, but and how messed up it did go.
Very.
Like even to this day, but it's still messed up, right?
Yeah.
And it was really kind of like you bridge all those things, and that's what started to bring me. Okay, this is I can't ignore this anymore. Like it just, I'm really glad we have science.
Yeah.
But it's such a small portion of the whole thing.
Totally.
So did that? I'm really shortening how I talk about it, but did any of that come to you with the, I'll say your belief in any kind of time? Like you said, you were very physics oriented, math oriented.
Yeah.
So math is supposed to be believe in the intelligibility of the universe.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it all fits together too, Levi. That's the part that's unbelievable to me. Like the trees outside, they grow. We have nothing to do with it.
Yeah. They grow. Birds nest in them. We have nothing to do with that. Birds migrate when the trees, hibernate for the winter. Nothing to do with, it's a whole system that has nothing to do with us.
It's all perfect.
Yeah.
Like it's like, it's not like, I kind of go like, well, it bridges into the free will discussion for me sometimes too. But I don't go down that road so much anymore, because it's just like, well, this podcast is a similar situation to that, right? Like, how come this happens today?
Yeah.
Like we happen to match up, but like it's not like there was just it all fit together because of what we did.
If you could all see our email thread, you would realize that it's just nothing that we did made this work.
No, and it's just, to me, when you start to see that, you said it earlier about people accepting that they don't have control. Like that to me is a big one to do. Like I'm here because of all my decisions. Well, really?
Well, kind of, but also like your decisions went as they did for how many reasons outside of anything you're even remotely aware of?
So did some of that factor into how you're like think about it? Does it think into like how you move to now write about scripture and how like, because it's, to me, it's all in there too.
Yeah.
Like that's the amazing part to me.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things in my story that's very different than yours is that I grew up assuming all of that was true already. And so I don't necessarily have, you talk about shifting perspectives and changing perspectives. Right. My life has been one of, I would say, deepening perspectives.
Okay.
In that, like I had simplistic ways of understanding things, but by and large, when that next layer of complexity was unveiled to me, it kind of fit. It kind of made sense. I was able to, not that it's intuitive, but I follow it and I understand it, and it makes sense of the way that I understand myself and the world.
Can you give an example, like of what that would be kind of like?
Yeah. So I think I grew up with the assumption that I am not finally the one in control of my life and the decisions that I make and the things that I do.
You grew up with that.
I did. Yeah. I think my parents did a really good job of parents in church did a really good job of just, impressing upon me that, God is intricately involved in everything that goes on. And that's a simple idea that you can communicate to a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old.
Yes.
And yet it's one that, has all these rippling implications. You talk about the free will debate.
Yeah.
Like that you arrive at, 15 years down the road after wrestling with that and its implications. But the core truth there is graspable. You can hold on to that, and it helps you make sense, and it becomes a lens through which you interpret everything around you.
Well, when you say the free will, part of the discussion, I framed this to a few other pastors, was I said, I had nothing to do with coming into this world. And I probably won't have a lot to do with going out of this world. My question is where is the line between those that suddenly you now have the ability to choose in this perfect structure that's created all around us?
Yeah.
You now have the ability to decide something that affects that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where's that line?
Totally.
I can't find it.
It's a great question, right? Like the line between, a decision can be real but still be affected by things.
Yes.
Right? Like that's a hard line to is that true? To what extent is that true? A very legitimate wrestle to engage in.
Well, I go back to C.S. Lewis on this one. I think he wrote something to the fact of something that you're never really going to know the answer to. Just let it sit. There's a lot more stuff to deal with than trying to end all this debate kind of. Yeah. And I kind of know where I sit.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things. And I like it because I think it does cause you to think differently sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Right. Like you talked about, suffering earlier on.
Yeah.
The having certain, you say, it'll never be a fully resolved debate. And I think that's true. And I think the more healthy way to look at it is to say there are some things that we can say generally and fully with great certainty, right? My decisions do matter.
Yeah.
But they're not final. They're not decisive. They're not the be all end all. They're not the authoritative. Yes. Like both of those things are true. God is intricately involved. Yeah. And my decisions matter. How do I reconcile those? That's a hard thing to say.
See, that's what I pull out. It's Philippians 4:7, right? The peace of God surpasses all understanding.
Yeah.
So but yet it doesn't stop us in the pursuit of understanding.
That's right.
How is that? It's, you're never going to learn it all.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to matter, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really good in the day and age that we live in for that to be an understanding we arrive at, which is to say we won't arrive at all understanding.
Right.
Because, our temptation as those who are inclined to worship ourselves is to assume that we are the pinnacle. We are the high point of the physical world, and we are the very top of that pyramid. And yet the testimony of the scriptures is going to be that we are always derivative creatures. We are not God.
No.
And the fundamental distinction in this universe is between God and not God, right? Like Jewish and not Jewish.
Yeah.
God and not God.
Yes.
Captures everything.
Okay.
And that distinction is the most serious distinction, because any distinction between the not God, some of that stuff really matters.
Yeah.
But the fact that we are not God is, I think, the primary identifier of what we fundamentally are. And yet it's so far from how we tend to, think of ourselves first and foremost.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I'm thinking of another thing I recently heard about, how knowledge and information and getting to know everything. That seems to be almost like a pursuit.
Yeah.
To live forever and to know everything. Mm-hmm. That's already been done, though. And we're not. We're a result of that being, right? That it's not even a being. Being is a terrible word for it, but
of God.
Because it's good that we're on this, because I was in this other conversation the other day, because I hear God's plan. I hear that word a lot, and I don't like the word plan because it's God's design to me. It's perfect. He doesn't go back and replan.
Right.
It's everything fits together. From what it started to where it's going to go, it's already there. It's not like he's going back to come up with a new strategy for how this is going to go.
Right.
And for a long time, when I first was starting to understand this, especially going with Bible and ancient history and kind of working the two together, I would like when I go back to like Egyptian and myths, like the Greek myths, all that.
Yeah.
Trying to put the two together in the sense that God's trying to figure out how to deal with his creation of man. That's where I first kind of was thinking.
Which is very much, what the Greek myths are like, is that they don't know what they're doing as people. And so many of the myths humans are even accidental. They're incidental. They're offshoots of conflicts or whatever kinds of things.
And bringing that idea of the human, the Greek, whoever it is, and making them a deity, like making them a god, right? Like over and over again.
Yeah.
And it's actually been through Tom Holland's Dominion that made me shift in, it's the reverse of that. It's us trying to figure out God's design, not him trying to figure, he's already got us figured out.
Yeah.
He created us.
Yeah.
But how we're trying, because when you think about, when you go back in ancient times, we haven't changed.
No.
Very much. No. Technology's changed dramatically.
Yep.
But
language has changed significantly.
Yes.
But we're basically the same.
It's kind of crazy when you think about it. To me, anyway.
Yeah.
And I find it is. So go back to the writing messages.
Yeah.
The sermons. You'll never have something not to write about.
No.
Or to talk about.
Yeah. Job security. That's what that is. There will always be more that needs to be said. Because everything in the Bible is essential. None of it's optional.
It's crazy.
Can't cut any of it out. And God's people need to hear all of it. So you gotta, if you ever think you've finished,
you start over again.
You probably are done. But that doesn't mean the work is done. So
right. No, it's like pause, press, repeat.
Yeah.
So when you're in that mode, do you find it often hard to what you're going to focus on versus like, because you probably know what you're going to talk about, right? Because I think most of the campuses all have
we preach the same text,
right?
Yeah.
So you know the text,
yeah.
But even the text, as we've talked about already, can go in unbelievable directions.
Yeah.
Like one of the I learned this recently. I think you guys get together when you're going to do and discuss a little bit about what you want to talk about.
Yeah.
I think that would be an amazing meeting to sit in.
It's a lot of fun.
Oh, I think it would be just crazy to be a fly on the wall in that meeting.
Yeah. Like sometimes more than other times, but yes. Depends who's in that conversation.
You would probably bring aspects to that we'll never hear.
Yeah.
That you didn't think about, right?
Yeah. Like so much of getting better at communicating publicly is deciding what not to say.
Yes.
Which is like,
that's a big one.
It's something that you pour so much of yourself into that to cut edges and corners off, like feels devastating. But you ultimately your goal is not, I want the fulfillment of saying everything, but it's what is the main thing?
Yes.
Like there's so many things this text is saying.
Yes.
But our pattern is basically what is the structure of this text? Maybe it's a poem, maybe it's a story,
right?
Maybe it's a logical argument. What emphasis is revealed by the structure, right? Because if Paul says a whole bunch of clauses and then at the end goes therefore, what comes after the therefore is the main thing,
right?
You can say lots of stuff about the other stuff, but if you don't talk about all that other stuff in light of that therefore, you've actually missed his point altogether. If you're not emphasizing the things that he is emphasizing in the way that he wrote it. So at that level, literary analysis helps significantly. Say, okay, what is essential? To say, okay, what is all this building towards? Is there a different way I'm supposed to think about God? Is there an action that's commanded of me? Is there whatever it may be?
Right.
We're the way that I think about it, and there's quite a if you look at preachers across the world and all different denominations and traditions, there'd be a wide range of different answers in terms of, what's the main point of preaching? But I think it's to say, what is the main point of this text in its context, both, the letter it's a part of, but also the whole Bible, which it's a part of. What is it saying? What is the unique contribution of this? And how does it fit in the larger story? Because the larger story is all about Jesus.
Yes.
And so this particular text, I'm going in assuming it's going to tell me something about what it means to know him, love him, follow him. whatever it might be. And so for me, that helps take some of the mystery away from what my job is.
Ah, okay.
It doesn't limit the mystery of the scriptures.
Right.
It just says, okay, but
Were
for
you-
this week, what am I going to say? I'm going to say the main thing that I want to say is what I want. I want it to be the main thing that the text says.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
No, that's
Which maybe for some people is surprising. They kind of think, oh, I'm gonna take the scriptures and leap off of it to say other things. But in fact, what I want to do is I want to find the main thing and then get deep into that main
Right.
thing. So
and that takes a while to
Oh, yeah.
to like what I call it, almost simmer, right? Like you
yeah,
can't like
that's a good word for that.
it's like
Yeah.
I found that it's a very useful thing when you're
Mm.
in that mode of trying to create something in an essence new or a new understanding of it.
Yeah,
And the simmering does make a like that's why I like the Bible study that's a week long.
yeah,
Because you can start like literally at the beginning
yeah,
and it can simmer the text. Right?
yeah. That's good.
And sometimes I'm amazed at how I can read it. And then when I read it the next time, it's like, this could be age too, but it's like, wow, that's just
That's not it. Don't worry.
different.
That's probably not age.
Oh, I hope it's not yet.
We'll call it spiritual insight.
Well, I feel like kind of like it's exploding. And one of the things that I find, like, I love the format of the message as an example, in the sense that someone sits down and theologically, logically, historically, however you want to put it, puts together an interpretation of what they're seeing. And they've spent time thinking about it. I think that's cool.
Yeah,
But what I've come to find is, because you've also got the whole sense of community,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Individual mixed with community
Yeah.
and trying to bring that all together, which is, I think, it's one of the biggest things I've realized coming out here is how important that is. I mean, it's got the core community. We need each other. Like it's the bottom line, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think I quite understood to what level. And that's what made me intrigued by the podcast world because it's not in that format to me. Like it's not a script. Well, what we're doing here is not a scripted form.
Yeah.
But it's a way of actually learning without like that structure to it. Because we're so used to movies, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And like they don't come together in a it needs to be linear in that format, or otherwise we won't understand it.
Yeah.
But
or we'll feel unfulfilled at the end of it, or whatever.
Like, what the heck is that?
I wasted 2 hours of my life.
It's incomprehensible.
Yeah.
It's art.
Yeah.
But where we get into this format, and that's what I think I found so fascinating with it, is it goes down avenues as they come into our dynamic thinking. Because we don't think linearly either, to any stretch by and large, right? We learn linearly, it seems, right? And then we're taught linearly.
Yeah.
And I think when you're doing a message, to be comprehensible, it has to be like that. And then the depth that you go in those and bringing other threads into it, like I find most of those pastors at Northview who are teaching it usually have so many threads in their message that you could spend the next week pulling them off and going down it.
That's very true.
So I'll go back to, because I don't usually do this, but I wanted to try and get to your first, because I write notes at each one of them, right? And I wanted to go to the first one that you talked about, that you had, right?
Yeah.
But I was also thinking that word abide was in that.
Oh, okay.
And I finally found abide. But what I also was totally impressed with is how much information in, like, so that would be, I'll say 100 messages, right? Was that your first?
One of my first.
So that would be 2.5 years ago?
Yeah, about that.
So would that be more? That'd be like 130 messages as an example. That if you've gone every weekend, that's what you accumulate. And the amount of information there is like, I was blown away by it. I like, there's just so many references, connections. And I was going, okay, that's cool. So, which brings me now to another question I want to ask. Yeah. It might be close to our last one, but what are you reading?
What am I reading? So right now, I'm reading.
Have you been a reader outside of the Bible?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So over the course of the degree that I just finished, lots of books. Had to read I don't know, close to 200 books in 4 years, I think. That might be an overestimate. I had to read a lot of
That's
books.
a lot of books.
So basically, I was constantly reading for 4 years. The challenge was that I was always reading what I was required to read.
Oh, okay.
So that's hard for me.
Right.
That takes a lot of the joy out of it because you're reading for a purpose.
I hear you.
Yeah. So what I've loved since, because I graduated we walked this stage in October, but finished our studies in July,
Right.
August. What I've loved in these last 6 months is to pick what I want to read. And so what I've picked, it ends up being very related to what I do for work.
Oh, I'll bet it does.
But it's just whatever I'm feeling in the moment.
So what do you
So right now I'm reading a book called Lectures in Calvinism by Abraham Kuyper. Abraham Kuyper was, I believe, the president of the Netherlands, or the prime minister,
Okay,
they call her, in the 18th century. So he lived from kind of 1750 to 1850, somewhere in that range.
Wow.
And he's basically writing a worldview book. It's a series of lectures that was turned into a book where he was contrasting, the kind of the European Reformed worldview with the atheistic worldview, with the Catholic worldview, with some other kind of major worldviews to say, do they actually afford the resources within and of themselves to develop a flourishing society off of them? Like their assumptions, their kind of core tenets. Can you build a flourishing society? Flourishing according to how the scriptures define flourishing.
Right.
Can you build a flourishing society off of it? Or do you have to draw on other things to supplement your core assumptions and your worldview? Which is a very interesting thing. It's a very slow read because it's a bit of a technical, it's dense. No illustrations, no pictures, obviously. And it was, it's written like a Dutch speaker, a high-end Dutch speaker, a technical Dutch speaker spoke 250 years ago.
Wow.
So it's a bit of an interesting one to read, and it's a challenge for myself. But the question of, worldview formation and how our beliefs translate into a whole culture and a whole life on top of them. And, in the present, how we kind of don't have an articulated foundation, and yet we still have a worldview which has been created off of it culturally. That kind of stuff fascinates me. So to have someone who's getting back to the foundation and interrogating the foundation, poking at it to say, does it hold? Is it sufficient? Does it actually work?
That's neat.
It's really interesting to read. And especially a guy who was so well versed theologically, like a lecturer at universities in Bible stuff, but who also then went on to become prime minister. Like that's a unique creature that has a special mind in a lot of ways.
It's like a Wilberforce almost.
Yeah.
Kind of like bringing two
totally
religion and politics together.
But also like prime minister. So like to the highest point he could get in his context, that's where he was.
What put you onto this book?
I found it at a thrift store. That's
okay.
And I recognized the name. The title was interesting to me, so I just kind of picked it up and was curious. So
do you have a recommended book that you've had since you've been able to choose the books that you've gone through, like that you really found like fascinating? Like you're obviously really into this book.
Yeah, this book is great, but I wouldn't recommend it for everybody because it's not the most exciting unless you're really into theology and worldview.
Interesting though, it's
from the 18th century.
Well, I mean, I mentioned Dominion, and I've talked about Dominion quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that it's kind of like a history of like Christianity.
Yeah.
Which goes literally from the very beginning before we had put together the idea of like God to, I think it brings it up almost to present day. Like it's super dense. But the names of and I hear them every once in a while because they'll be referenced like Eusebius and they'll bring I'm in the Irish world, right? Like it's coming into and the guy's name was Bede.
Okay.
Bede. I'd never heard of these. And I think there's a huge gap between what Paul read or wrote and where we are like 50, other than the Reformation, like with Martin Luther, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get a better handle of how that fits in with how
it's a great question.
I think I'm kind of blown away by it. So
I do have a book recommendation.
Oh, good. That's good.
So this, for some context, we didn't have a chance to talk about it at all. The other half of my job at church is overseeing one of our leadership development programs. So I oversee our undergraduate program.
See, this is why I never see you anymore.
I know. That's my midweek stuff.
Oh, okay.
So myself and a coworker, Michelle, together, we oversee it. I oversee the academic side of things.
Okay.
She oversees kind of the structural, programmatic side of things. And one of the things we do with our students is we have a weekly book club where we're reading a book chapter by chapter together and talking about it. It was a lot of fun.
That'd be neat.
Yeah, it's great. They're undergrad students who are ready to engage and learn.
Sponges.
Yeah, they're awesome. But we read the book together. I don't know. You may have heard of it. It's called Gentle and Lowly. It's a book by the guy's name is Dane Ortland.
I know Dane Ortland.
Yeah,
not personally, but I know the name.
Yeah. So the book is Gentle and Lowly, and it basically explores the section in Matthew 11 where Jesus says, "Come to me, all of you who are burdened and heavy laden. I will give you rest for your souls. Take my yoke upon you. It's easy. My burden is light. I am gentle and lowly in heart." And he basically takes that phrase, gentle and lowly in heart, and explodes it and meditates on it and finds other scriptural texts that are related to it, which is to counter the notion that, God is an angry God, or he's a hard master, or he's a distant God, and says, okay, but what does the Bible actually say about what God is like?
Right.
And in particular, what he is like to those who are weary and heavy laden. And it's really fascinating. He draws from lots of theologians from a couple centuries ago.
Wow.
Drawing on their work to say he's not doing anything novel here. What he's doing is he's laying a reminder for us, a foundational reminder for us that the church has believed and has held to for years, but kind of gets lost in the wash of all the other assumptions that we bring about what God is actually like.
Yeah.
And so this is it's really accessible. It's the kind of book you could read annually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And with our students, I will read it annually because we do the book club every year with a fresh group of students. But that's my recommendation. I've read it twice now. Okay. Gentle and Lowly.
Really? That is very cool. Because there's just so much that seems to be out there on every subject, right?
Yeah.
And it's like I don't even know how I came up with the Tom Holland, to be honest. Because as soon as I say that, right, Spider-Man wrote a book, and it's like, no, it's not the guy.
Like more academic Spider-Man.
Well, yeah. Well, I was going to say that Tom Holland also has some interesting things to put out.
Yeah, he's a pretty thoughtful guy.
He very much is. He's had some pretty interesting series that he produced. So, like, I'm not dissing Tom. I'm not dissing either one of you. I'm just trying to explain here that it's a different kind of, shall we say, writing. That's right. But I think some of it came from listening to a number of like different kind of podcasts around the area, right? And I found that has brought forward a lot of things that I just don't literally.
Yeah.
I tried to, but I like Stephen C. Meyer. Like he wrote Darwin's Doubt.
Oh, yeah.
And
I think I just saw that at Valley Village this week.
Well, that book had a profound effect on me too, because it was like going back to the science world. The whole question kind of came up to the Cambrian explosion. So this is like a new Earth, old Earth. So if you're a new Earth, it doesn't really fall into that. And for me, it's not a big argument because the point is faith. It's not whether you're right about what happened. But this happened like the Cambrian time frame is in the 500 million zone ago, right?
Yeah.
And actually here in BC is where they found these Cambrian explosion animals. And they were animals that appeared complete with no predecessors.
Wow.
So evolution falls apart enormously here, right?
Yeah, totally.
Because they just came about.
Yeah.
And they found like 37 different kinds of like the brachiopods, trilopods. But it's right here in BC, which is kind of amazing thing that happened. And what was done shortly after the Origin of Species came out is science indoctrinated this thing called methodological naturalism. So if you put forward anything that was like metaphysical nature, right? Like unconscious, as an example.
Yeah.
Science doesn't just look at it and say, nah, this is... It's excluded from science.
Right.
Like it was a doctrine that was put in place.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of going, how have I never heard of this before?
Yeah.
And that came out of Darwin's Doubt. And it just led down so many different streets that like, well, it's the the fine, balanced universe, right?
Yeah, the fine-tuning.
Fine-tuned universe.
Yeah.
The intelligent design.
Yeah.
Steve Meyer's quite big onto both of those, which for me, that draws that part of my world together.
Yeah.
It just kind of goes, like I've written, like if you believe in science, sorry, but you kind of believe in God. They run hand in hand.
Yeah.
So you gave us the book recommendation. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to kind of... I think I'd love to do this again, because we didn't even talk about your other side.
Yeah, that's true.
You were saying, but it took a while to get to do this. Maybe we'll just have a coffee discussion. Anyway, any final kind of comments that you'd like to express to those who might be listening? Because it's been a pretty crazy, interesting kind of thread of story here today.
I don't know. I think, Doug, you asked great questions, and
Thanks.
I feel like you just draw things out, and you've got a mind that loves a connection.
Yes,
and so I very much...
Curiosity is amazing.
Oh,
to
yeah.
me. I just,
that's a gift you have, and I don't. So I appreciate that.
I often was saying the other day that people, like, I don't like the word retirement.
Okay.
Because I think it's just a silly society thing. Because like to like when you're at a point, like my head explodes. Like I can't read enough stuff. I can't talk about like it's just so much stuff to learn, right? And now that I feel like I kind of have the one thing sorted out, and that is the God thing. In the sense that there is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Paul helps enormously in that to me. And it's expressing it in the sense that, like, because now I think, like, earning my way in seems kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah.
You created me and now I can earn my way in?
Yeah.
Like, how does that work? So to me, all of those things start to really kind of like, this is a great time to be alive. Like, same with the Bible and links. Like, you can just, like, find so much stuff out in an instant. And you couldn't do that even 30 years ago.
No, it was all in a library or a database somewhere that you may or may not have had access to.
And you've probably spent most of your life in that mode now, right? Like, you don't know any different.
Yeah, most of my kind of adult, late teenager adult stuff, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's like, where's that going to go next, right?
No idea. That's another podcast.
Well, I'll tell you, Levi, it's been wonderful. Pastor Levi Friesen has been with us today. I was going to say, hopefully I haven't cut my head off on this one as much as previously. Super enjoyed having you. This has been a long time in coming, but it's really kind of cool to do this. And I hope you've enjoyed this today, the Better Than Not podcast, in this episode and all the things that we explored with Levi. So, and he gave you the book recommendation. So if you're looking for something new to read, Gentle and Lonely?
Gentle and Lowly. Yeah, Gentle and Lowly by Dane Ortland.
So with that, we'll sign off, and thanks again for listening to Better Than Not. Are we on? Good. Welcome to the Better Than Not podcast. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. But when we at least do something, we know it's almost always better than not.